Hello, everybody, and welcome to Industrial Automation. It doesn't have to. In case you're new to the program, I'm Brandon Ellis. I'm your host and also the owner of elliTek. As we jump into the episode for today, I want to ask that you hit that follow button and subscribe button based upon the platform that you're listening on. And if you're listening specifically on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and you enjoy what you hear today, leave us a 5-star rating and review. We sure would appreciate it. Now that we've got the marketing out of the way, I just want to say thanks for tuning in. So, let's get started. Hey guys, it's Brandon and Beth. Hey Beth.
Hey Brandon.
Oh, I gotta do your music. Which one is it?
You best. It's more like it.
That's right. Well, welcome to Industrial Automation Doesn't Have To. Thanks to everyone for joining us today. And we just came off an episode. We're down to one. We're doing one a month now on average, and so we got a little bit too busy for us, so we're going to do that. We're also going to try to keep things to around 35 minutes. So going to see if that's
if we can keep true to that, right?
Yeah, I'm quite a talker and quite a pontificator, so I don't know if that's possible or not. But today we're going to be talking about something pretty cool that comes down to, I'll just say, instability. But before we get to the title,
yes.
What else have we got to talk about?
Oh, I was going to ask you how your flight was.
My flight?
Yes, to Myrtle Beach.
Myrtle Beach. So I was on spring break for us last week, and so we took off to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Beautiful Myrtle Beach. A lot of people give Myrtle Beach a bad rap, but I'll tell you why it was a big deal. Because, number one, I am a private pilot and have been for a number of years. And so, but my wife has never really taken a long trip with me. And not that that's a super long trip, about a 2-hour flight from Knoxville. But we flew in a small single-engine plane, 4-seater, but a small plane, down to Myrtle Beach from Knoxville. And so, yeah, she when she's gone flying around with me, it's usually regionally. Just we fly around to look at the mountains, look at the leaves, that kind of thing. And usually, not more than 3,500 feet, which we're at 1,000 feet anyway, so about 2,500 feet off the ground. Well, to go across the Appalachian Mountains, the Great Smoky Mountains,
you have to get a little bit higher.
And then we had quite a few winds, so turbulence and stuff. So we had to go up to 9,500 feet.
Ooh.
And so we take off, and I just want to get to 9,500 feet because you can't really start moving fast cruising until you're done with your climb. And so up we go. So it took about 10 minutes to get up there. But I looked at her, and she's just gripping the door. And I was like, "What's wrong?" And she's like, "I've never been this high before." And so we had a good smooth flight down there. But the reason Myrtle Beach I love about Myrtle Beach is, the beach, of course, is beautiful, and the ocean, Atlantic Ocean. But where we stay, we're on the ocean front. We didn't have a car. Rental cars are expensive.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's expensive to fly a small plane down, but granted, but if you don't have to pay for something, why do it? So we landed at the airport. We Ubered over to our hotel. We stayed there. We were oceanfront, but we could walk anywhere that we needed.
Yeah.
It was so convenient. And then oceanfront restaurants. And so literally within 3 minutes walk, we had 5 restaurants that we could choose from. One of them's on the pier.
Oh, nice.
And so we could sit on the pier. We actually had lunch there, sitting on the pier and watching the ocean. The weather was beautiful, and it was a cool thing.
Good.
You go to a lot of other places, and you don't have the restaurants around. You can't walk 2 minutes to a grocery store and things of that nature. And so Myrtle Beach kind of gets a bad rap, being the redneck Riviera and stuff like that. But I'll tell you, we loved it and had a great time, and I would highly recommend it. So, and the flight back was good too.
Good. Nice.
But yeah, that was my spring break. What did you worked?
Yes, I did work. So we don't need to talk about that.
You don't have anything to offer.
No.
We'll wait until you go on vacation, and we'll talk about your vacation.
Okay. All right.
But I'm back, and we're back safely, and good Lord got us through that safely, and now it's trying to shake back into work.
Get into the groove again.
And so you're all ready to go, and I'm catching up.
Wow.
So give us our title today.
Okay, so today it's Industrial Automation. It doesn't have to be unstable.
Unstable.
So what does that mean, Brandon?
Well, boy, what doesn't it mean? Okay, so I don't want to. We're going to try not to elaborate too much, but and also you don't like it when we're doom and gloom, and so
Well, it's kind of hard not to be right now,
Yeah.
but we don't have to dwell on it. How's
that's right.
that?
And so let's talk about that. So the purpose of this podcast is to talk to especially the C-level folks within our industrial manufacturers and not just industrial manufacturers as far as the manufacturers themselves, but the machine builders that are building equipment for them, the systems integrators that are working on things that are trying to make decisions through this deal. And we have one little piece of a viewpoint into what's going on within our company. And so I try to talk to a lot of folks. We try to read a lot of articles, see what's going on, and kind of try and separate the wheat and the chaff from stuff. But the fact is, our focus is to try to help people make more educated decisions, or at least hear other perspectives.
Yeah.
Not that we're not trying to give business advice or anything like that, but what we're seeing, and the fact of the matter is, we're seeing.
Yeah, there's increased prices across the board.
We're seeing inflation. We're seeing labor shortages, and then what you'll hear on the news is supply chain crisis. I maintain that supply chain crisis is the result of the first two items.
Okay.
And there's other stuff, but those are two primary things.
So do you want to briefly explain what the supply chain is?
So I think and this is brandology.
Okay.
Well, I don't know what to say. I didn't know if I need to say supply chain or if I need to say brandology. Let me say supply chain brandology.
There we go.
I was speechless for a second. I made myself speechless.
I can't believe that.
And so I guess we didn't rehearse that part. But supply chain, to me, it's according to where you're standing. Okay. It's like a chain. Think of links in a chain. And when we talk about there's a disruption or a break in the supply chain, that means that every link relies on the one in front of it and also behind it. And so if you're standing at the end of the chain, so let's talk automotive. That's one of the big deals right now. What is in huge demand? Used car values have increased 68%.
Oh my goodness.
Just in the last quarter. And so why? Because new cars are not in supply. Why? Because semiconductor shortage, resin shortage. There's a labor shortage. So here you heard me say those two things: raw materials, and labor. So supply chain. If you're the consumer, you don't really care about an engine. You don't care about a chip. You just need a car. And of course, economics 101, supply and demand. If you have ample supply and you have reasonable demand, then you have a stable economy, I guess you would say. Well, if those two things get out of balance, if demand skyrockets and there's not ample supply, then suddenly we have a shortage.
Toilet paper.
Toilet paper. Your example of a supply chain crisis is toilet paper.
Well, yeah.
So if you have suddenly ample supply but no demand, then suddenly this thing that isn't it's worthless.
Yeah.
And it's not usable. And so that's kind of the concept of supply and demand when it comes to economics 101. And so the greater the supply, the less the demand, the less you can sell that for. The greater the demand and the diminishing supply means that now it's more valuable. Value means you can charge more for it. Charging more for it is inflation. I mean, after a point, it becomes inflation because for people to buy that car, they need more money at work. If you're not paying them enough money, they're going to leave you and go somewhere else to make more money. Now you have a labor shortage. So the problem is those two things, increase raw materials, increase cost, and labor both play in the equation that results in a healthy supply chain, and it's wherever you're standing. So if you're the automotive builder, and you've got consumers saying, I need a car, then you've got demand.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're looking back at the people that are supplying you with engines, that are supplying you with transmissions, with tires, with all this stuff, to say, get me the stuff, get me so I can put this together. Well, if suddenly those suppliers can't provide, then you have a supply chain disruption. Take a step up. Now you're the engine provider, but your engine, or even transmissions and engines are mechanical, but they have more electronics on them than ever. Transmissions are totally controlled electronically nowadays. And then you take that into other parts of the vehicle. Your Bluetooth system, your GPS system, 5G is coming into cars. All of your connectivity and all the stuff that we've come to rely upon. Even your stereo system. I mean, most cars have touchscreens in them. A lot of them are 8 to 10 inch touchscreens nowadays.
It's amazing.
And so the consumers have wanted that. That's what they're willing to pay for. But there's no supply because we're missing the semiconductors and the things that need to go into that. And so all of these are disruptions. The hard part about what's going through right now, and it makes it difficult to be, easily, shoot rainbows out your ears kind of thing about what's going on, is we're dealing with both. Mm-hmm. And so we were already dealing with labor shortages because of a pandemic, great resignation, whatever they want to coin it as. People were leaving their jobs either for new jobs to pay more, or to let them work from home, or give them some kind of benefits, or they were just deciding to leave that job. Now, I'm not getting into all the government stuff and all the unemployment bumps and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about just in general. A lot of folks, especially in the younger workforce, sat back and said, if I don't have to have all the stuff that I want, if I can mitigate my wants to only what I need, then I don't need to work as much, right? And suddenly, the jobs we started seeing, the labor shortage we started first with, a lot of course, they were forced out because of the pandemic, but the restaurant industry and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But manufacturing also started seeing a lot of the folks that really are the workers that keep things moving, that being the production line associates and stuff like that, started either going somewhere else or just deciding, it's not going to work. I tell you, a lot of people stopped working because of the doggone cost of childcare.
I believe it.
It's spiked.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of these things have just happened all at once. And it's like if there was any one, it's manageable. Two, okay. But now all of a sudden we've got both those plus all the other stuff that's kind of resulting from it. It's just kind of a storm out there. And so what's supply chain is every link in the chain. Disruption is every link that's not working well. And the problem is a lot of links are not working well.
Yeah. So I was reading where, this was a side note. It's expected that by late summer or fall, things will stabilize. What are you hearing?
Okay, well, let me give you a little rainbow talk.
Okay.
And then I'm going to follow it up with some dark clouds.
Okay.
A few of our suppliers, robot suppliers, have been long lead times, and suddenly we're starting to see stock come back on the shelves.
Okay.
And that makes me happy.
Yeah.
That's encouraging. The dark cloud is some of the ones that we have seen have managed this stuff pretty well and kept up with, still reasonable on their lead times and deliveries, are starting now to suddenly slip.
Oh.
And some of them a lot.
Okay.
And so we're seeing improvements in some place where they were suffering a long time, and all of a sudden now they've beaten it back and now they're getting back into the game. The ones that have managed it very well are suddenly losing footing. And so it's kind of it makes me happy, and at the same time I'm discouraged. And so I guess I'm kind of where I normally am or have been through this whole thing. And so what we want to see is a very definitive recovery as far as the supply.
Okay.
again, where are we in the supply chain? So we supply a lot of industrial. We're a distributor. We're also an integrator for robotic cells and things of that nature. And so we're supplying a lot of end users. We're supplying a lot of custom machine builders. We're supplying a lot of systems integrators. And they rely on hardware. If you're going to program a machine, you need something to plug your laptop into to begin programming. If you're going to build a machine, you need something to bolt on to build.
Yeah.
If you can't get that thing, then it just uproots the whole process. And so where we are is we are a primary supplier, but we're also looking to our suppliers to get us stuff. And so when I'm talking about our suppliers, our manufacturers, that's who I'm talking about. So the suppliers of the robots themselves, or the suppliers of the electric actuators, or the servo motors, the drives, the IoT units, things of that nature. Even our IOTA has we've been doing great, and now we're this thing has gone so long. We planned, but who could plan this long? I mean, honestly, we started hearing groans of this time last year.
Yeah.
Everybody's talking about, with the ports, we're starting to get crowded, and then we couldn't get workers to do this, and then there's semiconductors are through the roof because everybody's gone digital and all this kind of stuff. And we were talking about this last year.
Yeah.
And so here we are, basically a year later. Who dreamt that this would happen? That's a long way to ride this out, especially for small to medium size companies and manufacturers. Unless if you're in the EV game.
Oh, you're all over it then.
Except you can't find workers. And so that's the problem. Usually there's ebb and flow between industries. And so, it might be a downtime for this industry, but this industry is soaring.
Yeah.
But nobody survives labor shortage. Nobody survives lack of raw materials. Nobody.
Yeah.
It's according to what raw materials. And so that's kind of where we are. And it's a bit of a crisis for sure.
So,
but if it comes back, what'd you say, late summer?
Yeah, they're saying late summer or fall, things will stabilize.
I'll tell you, from your lips to God's ears, that's what we want. We need that so badly. And honestly, I feel like that's probably true.
Okay.
Now, maybe I was once told by a mentor of mine, a curmudgeon mentor of mine, that hope is not a strategy. But sometimes hope is going to be enough. And I think that it seems like things are starting to get pulled together and some things are starting to fill it out. The interesting thing that I'm waiting to see is, sorry, I'm getting off into the weeds here, is what's going to happen in China. Right now, China is having a huge reemergence of COVID, and they're undergoing nearly countrywide lockdowns. And whether you like it or not, folks, we are very reliant upon China for stuff. That's why we couldn't get masks and PPE and stuff like that, because we get most of that from China. And I think it's great that we're starting to adopt really what our forefathers, our grandparents and great-grandparents did, because mainly, they were going through Industry 2.0 100 years ago. And so they were understanding, how to use steam and that kind of thing. And so there was innovation, man.
Yeah.
That was huge innovation. It was an industrial revolution going on. And was it, what year when we have the last pandemic?
What did we say, 1919?
Is it 1919, 1912, something like that? Early 1900s. But then that gave way to the Roaring Twenties, which unfortunately gave way to the Great Depression. Now, we can have a podcast on if that's linked or not one day. But what can we learn from them? And I think one of the main things we learn from them is you basically manufacture where you sell. And that was what they had to do then. I mean, they had, they were coming into steam engines, so they had trains. So with the railway, they were able to now sell their goods a long way away. Well, goodness gracious, we can sell globally now. We have a global economy and that kind of thing. But still, being able to manufacture where you sell, meaning if you're selling to the United States, you manufacture, you're very vertical in the United States. And we're seeing a lot of companies start doing that, start reshoring, we call it, to bring things back. And so we'll see. But there's huge investments being made into chip manufacturing in the U.S. On U.S. soil. That's different. Electric vehicles, I think there's a huge push right now for not just assembled in America, but made in America, meaning that the pieces and the parts that are being made are manufactured where they're going to be sold, meaning the tires, the engine manufacturers, the semiconductors, the chips are made in the U.S. for automobiles that are being built, manufactured in the U.S. for sale in the U.S. And that's not normal.
No, because they pull parts from everywhere, don't they? Now?
Mostly parts, most automobiles should be stamped assembled in the U.S. All the sub-assemblies and things of that nature are not made in the United States. It's just a fact. But they're assembled in the U.S. And we need to get back to, I think, being more vertically integrated, meaning that a lot of that stuff is made in the U.S. and used and sold in the U.S.
Yeah, there's a lot of steps to get to that point.
Yeah.
But I liked your comparison, what you did, the ROI comparison pre-COVID, post-COVID. But so taking that into consideration, what were manufacturer supply chain efforts pre-COVID?
Well, I call that the old ROI, and we did a podcast on that. But the old ROI was pretty simple. Let's talk about that. Let's say we are having the same thing happen right now. So raw material costs go up. How do you solve that?
You find another source or find another raw material to substitute?
Well, you can, or you can reduce your bottom line.
Oh, okay.
And so you just, whatever steps you got to take, you're going to do more with less people. That's honestly what 2008 was. Leading up to 2009, the real estate, last time we had a real estate bubble and all that kind of stuff, it was triggered by fuel cost, increased fuel cost. In my opinion, I think there was a lot leading up to it. The fuel cost wasn't the problem. It was the catalyst that kind of helped us to the tipping point. And that was that companies all of a sudden were seeing costs go up because fuel costs were going up. Fuel costs affect everything. Logistics, your shipping, your receiving, all that kind of stuff, but also how much it costs to manufacture. And so fuel is a commodity. It should be traded as a commodity. It's not, but it's a commodity item, and it affects everything, just like corn.
Yeah.
And so we were seeing that go up. We had a lot of people, all the things that came up with, a lot of folks were in houses they couldn't afford, with bank loans and mortgages they really shouldn't have had. But raw materials went up. Manufacturers looked at that and said, whoops, we got to reduce our bottom line. They had ample labor.
Back then, yeah.
So again, we're dealing with one thing, right?
Yeah.
Raw materials goes up because of fuel costs, because of all this kind of thing. And so we cut our bottom line. And so they started laying people off. 2009 was a huge layoff year. A lot of people, unfortunately, lost their jobs. So when they lost their jobs, they couldn't afford their mortgage. When they couldn't afford their mortgage, the bank ended up with a surplus of houses. And then, then you had GM that had bought in, heavily invested in SUVs because we all love them. We love big, roomy vehicles, but they're gas guzzlers. Does it sound familiar now?
It kind of does.
And so we, George W. Bush was president then, and so he signed in the TARP program and bailed out GM, bailed out the banks because of all the real estate, because the banks were on the brink of failure because they're not real estate companies. They're they're banks. And so they were overextended and people just walked out on the deck because they had to. They didn't have a job. And so it was just a catalyst, and it just started this whole thing. But what we didn't have was a labor shortage. Well, now here we are. So your ROI then is, what's the return on investment? Well, if we say automate, we can, take a robot and replace 4 people. You can calculate that. Because it's justified because your costs are going up. You have to basically automate with the purpose of reducing labor. Post-COVID,
not that
we don't have labor. we have to automate just so we can have labor, to create labor, to reclassify the labor that we have. But suddenly, supply demand. You have a huge demand for labor. You have not very much supply because we have a labor shortage. You can't lay people off to cut your bottom line. You have to have them. And now they're going to leave if you don't pay them more. Yeah. So your cost of now your bottom line's gone up even more. It's just a perfect storm that we're in right now. So raw materials, fuel costs, and everything. What's fuel costs nowadays?
Oh, it was $4 something.
Here?
Yes.
What's the highest?
I heard $6.80 in Los Angeles.
So almost $7 a gallon. And I remember in 2008 having a conversation saying, what are we going to do if gas gets to $3 a gallon? Man, wouldn't it be great to be there now?
Right.
And so what a difference it makes. You know, what's that? That's how many years has that been? 20 years? No, not 20. 13 years. My math's off. I'm still in vacation mind. But the point being, the ROI now, of course, is reclassification of labor. We've talked a lot about that to be able to make the truck. But if you have a raw material shortage, your robots are even going to sit still. Now, they don't cost as much for a robot to sit still, but you're trying to depreciate this asset and things of that nature. And it's just a complex thing. We're getting kind of the high-low move from wrestling.
Explain the high move to people that don't watch wrestling.
Means when you have tag team wrestling, that means somebody's going to come at you up high while somebody else comes you from the opposite direction down low, and you're going to be caught in the middle. And so, we have the increased cost and the increased cost of materials and logistics and all that kind of stuff doubled up with the fact that we have a labor shortage. Labor shortage doesn't mean I just can't run. Labor shortage means I've got to pay people more than you do so that they can work for me and not for you.
Yeah.
And so now we're seeing wages increase substantially. Is it justified? I don't want to get into that. The point is it sustainable?
Yeah, so that was a lot. So
sorry.
No.
Sorry.
It just seems like a progression of crisis waves, one after another. But there will be an end point. But in the meantime, what can manufacturers do to prepare for future crises as well as try to ride this one out?
Well, I mean, you know as well as I do, in marketing, one of the big terms right now is sustainability. And usually we're talking about green initiative and the earth and that kind of stuff. In this case, I'm talking about as far as business.
Yes.
You have to be, what's going to make you more sustainable? That's a tough one. You've got to walk through and do a risk analysis. We talked about this with cybersecurity.
We did. Yeah.
But you really have to do basically what items do I absolutely have to have in place in order to keep making the truck? And then how can I afford to do that? And then what items can I get?
Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes that's just not available anymore, or the lead time is just way so far out or something. You can't just stop and wait. You can't. We did that during the pandemic. A lot of manufacturers just shut down, sent their people home, or had them trying to work from home or whatever, but they just were not you can't manufacture remotely.
No, you can't. That's impossible.
You can't. And so they did that, but that's not sustainable.
Yeah.
You have to be able to make the truck. You have to be able to move forward, especially, again, we do a lot within the automotive world, and automotive is honestly the high stress, in my opinion, manufacturing, because it's needed yesterday. It needed in half the time and for half the budget, and that's just always been automotive. Well, automotive is the epitome of supply chain because every link has to work in order to keep up with what's going on and keep up. And now the demand's through the roof, so we're fighting all this. And so, but I think that's what you have to do, from whether you're tier 1, tier 2, whether you're the auto manufacturer, or a supplier to the auto manufacturer, or a supplier to the tiered manufacturers. You have to figure out, what can I do to sustain this? Because you said it, there will be an endpoint.
There's got to.
There has to be. And so the only thing that's going to fix it is time. And you have to be able to manage your cash flow, manage your people, manage your manufacturing environment, and that's asking a lot. I know that's asking a lot, guys. But you're gonna have you gotta look at your business, look at your people, and figure out how to do it.
Yeah, and I think putting a huge emphasis on the employees that you have,
The people,
and taking care of them, that has got to be a big issue.
well, if you're still stuck in the old pre-COVID ROI, it doesn't work here because you don't have the people to just lay off and say, okay, we'll solve our bottom line problems that way in one fell swoop. You can't.
No.
You don't have enough people. So what you have to do is you have to figure out ways to keep people without necessarily just throwing more money at them.
Yeah.
Now, again, I'm not getting into what's deserving and what's not deserving as far as wages, but you've heard me say this before. There's a lot of truth in the fact that what defines a good job is a lot more than how much money you're making. Because I promise you, I don't care who you are listening to this right now, I can find a job that you will not be willing to do for any amount of money.
That's true.
And if you're miserable in your job, it doesn't matter how much people are paying you, that is not sustainable. And quite honestly, if you're miserable in your job, and this is a behavioral psychology statistic that's been known for years, is that on average, if you get a raise, and it doesn't matter how much the raise is, if you get a raise, I'm saying even if it's a substantial raise, 3 to 6 weeks is the longest that
so
elation of I'm making more money.
I've got an idea.
What's that?
The employer should have the raise this amount of money, and then every 3 to 6 weeks. Wait, here's another. The whole portion, but then just part of it.
Yeah. 3 to 6 weeks before you fall back into the realization that I hate my job. Yeah. For whatever reason. It might be a fantastic job, just not a fantastic job for you. Yeah. So employers are going to have to look at their people and try and decide what they can do with that.
Yeah.
And so let's talk a little bit about that. Well, actually, I jumped ahead, didn't I? The other thing is, you mentioned when I said we were talking about raw materials, you're like, find some other avenues, find some other suppliers.
Yeah.
I think suppliers are a key thing. Now, commodity items, if you're needing commodity items, I don't know. Maybe you rely upon your local distributors, local salespeople, local suppliers for that a lot. But most commodity items, I don't think it's that. Usually it's easier to take an air fitting and say, okay, well, we can't get this air fitting. Let's switch over to this other brand and get that. And that has impacts. I'm not going to hand wave that. It has impacts on your spare parts inventory and the cost there. It's a real cost. So if you change from product ABC to XYZ, they may be alike, but not alike enough that you can keep one on the shelf if either of the two go bad. So you may have to put two on the shelf, one of brand A, ABC, and one of XYZ. And so that's a cost as far as spare parts inventory. There may be new softwares that you don't have that you have to get because you switched from this controller to a different controller. And there may be a cost there, but there's also a training initiative there. Even with it, if it's not software and programming, knowing how to troubleshoot it, it may be how to install it, how to put it together. So there's training issues there. So just saying, we've always, and companies are big on standards, and rightfully so because of those things: spare parts management, cost management, training, and software type. As far as fluency when it comes to their maintenance folks and things of that nature. And so all those things are good and real things, but if suddenly you can't get that part anymore, you may have to step back and say, again, risk analysis. What's it going to cost us to swap to this other platform? And that's where I think if you have a invested partnership with a technically viable distributor. And of course, we're talking about industrial automation. So I'm talking about industrial automation products. So I'm talking about robots, servo drives, servo motors, amplifiers, motion controllers, PLCs, those kind of things, HMIs. IoT systems, things that are commonplace in today's high-level industrial manufacturing. If you can find a supplier that has more than just they have it on the shelf or they have a better price, but has the technical ability to help you implement, to help you really change your perspective or adjust your perspective to think outside of the box, to say, okay, we can't get this part, but if we take this piece from here and this piece from here and this piece from here and put them together in this way, we can get you where you need to be.
And they can provide training as well.
And they provide training. They can take care of that kind of thing and the support that your folks are needing. And so they relieve that burden.
Okay.
But the only thing I would encourage, if you're the one that's using that, you're the consumer on that. So you're the industrial manufacturing plant that's found the distributor that's helping you maintain sustainability by being able to put together these solutions that are a bit non-standard or definitely not with your internal standards or specifications. You need to embrace that partnership. Buy into that partnership. Don't just use them today and go somewhere else. That's wasteful as far as the skill sets and the things that you're building and the relationships that you're building. I think that for sustainability, you need your friends.
Yeah.
You need to build the networks and rely upon those. And honestly, if they're far, far away or in another country, they're not as worried about what's going on with you and your plant as they someone that's right here with you.
Yeah. And
so I think that for that type of distribution, that type of supplier, it's a big deal. But buy into that partnership and make it known. We're in this together, and this is our expectations from you, Mr. Distributor, Mr. Salesperson, Mr. Application Engineer, Mrs. Application Engineer, Mrs. Salesperson, whatever, is to come in and be with us during this. Help us get through this. Unfortunately, there's not distributors like that on every corner. If you're in our region, call elliTek. We're one of those. We'll fight through thick and thin with you. We've been digging stuff out and just pulling inventory from wherever we could get it just to keep people moving for the last nearly 12 months. And we'll keep fighting that fight. But find someone to fight the fight with you and then stick with them.
Yeah.
That's the only way it's going to work. Because if you're relying upon them for that support and then you go out and buy it from somebody else for a nickel cheaper, you really are going to cost yourself a lot more.
Yeah, yeah.
And the last thing is the people. And so that's where I jumped ahead on the outline.
I think I jumped ahead because we haven't gone over the operational analytics.
Oh, analytics. Well, we can talk about the analytics. I'm not to the analytics yet.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I jumped ahead.
I want to talk a bit about the people.
Please.
And maybe I'm circling back, so I'm sorry. But I read an interesting article, and that's what I want to get to. And in that article, it talked about that CEOs specifically needed to, I think the one thing it said, need to focus on, of course, focus on their people and retaining their people, but also focus on building the leaders of tomorrow. Now, that's interesting, right? So the focus was on what leadership skills that they want to start refining, helping people refine.
Okay.
So hiring and from within or from outside or whatever, but helping them become on people that you would hire for the path to leadership.
Yeah.
And I thought it was an interesting skill set that they came up with.
Okay, all right.
So I want to get your opinion. So leadership skills, agility.
Okay, being able to
go
from one thing to the next.
That's right. And I think that, hey, who hasn't had to be agile within the last
2 years?
2 years, yeah. Resilience.
People have had to be resilient.
You got to be able to bounce back.
Yeah.
And
accept loss.
here's
Learn
one
from
of my
it.
Here's one of my favorite ones. Empathy.
Oh, yes. Now, this is an interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
How would you define empathy?
We talked about this before we were recording, just in conversation. When I'm interviewing folks, a lot of times I have asked people, define empathy. Give me an example of a time when you were empathetic. And unfortunately, a large percentage of the younger folks and older, but most of the younger folks don't understand empathy. And so that's why I thought this was it was cool that it was, in this article anyway, that the CEOs are focused on empathy and how they can teach empathy. And I don't know how you teach empathy except to teach understanding of what empathy is. And if you don't know what empathy is, I'm going to tell you my definition of empathy. Being empathetic is not lording over someone. It's not saying they're having a hard time, I can swoop in and help them and save the day. That's not it at all. Empathy is hurting with someone. It's not solving their problem necessarily. It's just being with them during it. I mean, that's a big deal. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many times I've got. I was out actually with Sean, one of our salespeople, and we went to a customer, and I'd been working with this customer for 20 years, and I was not present. But one of the folks sent an email to him later. Of course, they were giving me a hard time. We were joking back and forth. That's just what we do. We have a great relationship. And, that when customers become more like family than customers. Yeah. But the guy had, of course, Sean was just meeting folks. And he took it upon himself to send an email that he didn't copy me on, but Sean showed it to me. I was glad he did. And he talked about, he said, the truth is, we've been through thick and thin together, Brandon and I. And he has jumped through hoops to help us in so many ways when he didn't have to. That is not that I helped them. Sometimes I just came there and I don't know the answer, but I'm coming and we'll figure it out or we won't, but we'll be together. That's empathy. And so in a leader, our leaders, I'll tell our customers, our employees all the time, if you're in trouble, call me. I don't know if I can help, but I'll be there. Because I don't want them to go it alone. Mm-hmm. Nobody likes to go it alone. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you're talking about work, if you're talking about your health, if you're talking about the loss of a loved one. Empathy. That's empathy. Being empathetic to say it's not showing sympathy. It's being empathetic. I know you're hurting. I don't know how to help. I'm here. That's empathy. We need more empathy.
Yes, we do.
The next one, digital fluency.
Okay, now that's interesting.
Yeah, that one caught me off guard.
So you're fluent in a lot of digital assets, or how do you take it? I don't know.
I think what it means is no longer are the days where it's acceptable to say, I don't do the digital thing here.
Oh.
I don't do email. I don't do LinkedIn. I don't do Facebook. Twitter, Pinterest, whatever. I don't know about TikTok. I mean, TikTok's kind of crazy, and I get a kick out of the TikTok videos. But I don't think good leaders need to be out, trying to do the latest dance craze on TikTok. But my point is, I think that you need to be fluent in that. You need to understand that. I also think that you need to be able to know what to say and what not to say in your social worlds. And there's all kinds of controversy about, I see articles all the time. So-and-so company fired this, trying to fire this employee because of something they said on social media. I'm not talking about that. That's poor choices. But what I'm talking about is if you're in a position of leadership or you've been groomed to leadership, you need to have people smarts, whether you're online or face-to-face.
Yeah.
And I've just watched just read comments. I always read the comments.
You do, don't you?
Some people say the most outlandish things, the most rude things in the comments on a post that I believe, I want to believe that if that person was sitting face to face across the table with the other person, they would never come out of their mouth.
Yeah.
And so that's just the behavioral psychology of online. It lets people be mean.
It's faceless. So.
Yeah, they feel like they've got some, I don't know. It's not empathy.
No.
So to me, that's, I don't know. Digital fluency, I think, though, is just being aware of all the different tools that are out there.
Okay.
And then, let's see, the next one. Inclusive leadership.
Inclusive leadership. So you would include everybody.
Include a lot of folks.
Yeah, but if you include everybody,
You get too many chiefs, not enough Indians.
Yeah,
That's right.
But no, nothing gets done, does it?
That's right. Paralysis by
There
analysis,
you
something
go.
happens.
Yeah.
The saying we used to always say was, at some point you gotta shoot the engineer and get busy working, because
Alan told me that one time.
because if you let the engineers have it, man, they'll just analyze it to death.
Oh, yeah.
And so at some point they've got to let go. And software developers the same way. It's never ready for release.
No.
And so those kind of things. But yeah, inclusive leadership, though, I think is letting other people have a say so.
Yeah.
Especially when they're involved in it involves them and what they're doing.
Oh, absolutely.
And their path within. And then finally, interpersonal communications.
Oh, don't be a jerk.
Know how to treat people. Now, the interesting thing is, a lot of those you can wrap all up in the empathy
You kind of can,
category,
can't you?
right? So if you're empathetic, you're not going to be
jerk.
A jerk. You're probably going to be more inclusive in how you're having your discussions and that kind of stuff. And as far as my digital fluency definition of knowing what not to post, if you're being empathetic, if you're an empathetic person, you're not gonna do that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, I thought that was interesting from that article.
That's a good one.
And I think those are good key points. And so at no point did you hear that article say, or me say, pay them more money. Now, people need to pay what they're worth.
Oh, absolutely.
They need to get paid what they're worth, and if they're worth a lot, you need to take care of them. But taking care of them, this article kind of pointed out to me that and emphasized that it just giving them some more money so they'll shut up and do their job is not what leaders are supposed to do.
It doesn't sound empathetic.
There's no empathy in that. That's kind of the old school way, though.
Yeah.
Look, I'm paying you. I'm paying you to do your job. Get there and do your job.
Yeah.
That's why people are leaving.
I had a boss that said you get your thank you every 2 weeks.
Yeah. I had a boss that every time I'd hand me my paycheck would say a small token of my appreciation. Yeah. So money's good. We all need money. And honestly, with gas prices going up, we got to pay for that kind of stuff. But I think that comes down to how can you kind of mitigate some of that. Now we're up to 46 minutes, so we need to start wrapping up here.
Yes.
So with that, the next thing, and you mentioned the analytics.
Yeah. So this is in reference to what manufacturers can do to prepare for future crises.
That's right. And also to make their...
And overcome these.
Stability comes down to understanding your process.
Mm-hmm. That's where analytics come into play.
Exactly. What's the only reason to enact an IoT system in manufacturing?
Make an educated business decision.
That's right. And so IoT, it means nothing without quality data.
Yeah.
So you can do all the analytics you want, and if the stuff you're analyzing is wrong,
garbage
in, garbage out.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really comes down to your data stream and things of that nature. Well, IoT, we've been talking IoT since 2014.
Yeah.
Since the advent of the data commander. And so getting good data and the IT-OT convergence, which we're all about isolation, but nevertheless, cybersecurity and all that kind of stuff. Cybersecurity is a big worry right now, but analytics. So analytics is a big word. So I said earlier that in 2008, during the last economic downturn, that there was a lot of things that led up to what resulted to the real estate bubble burst and things of that nature, recession basically that we went into. But I felt like it was increased fuel cost that was the catalyst to kind of causing the tipping point. So what do I think? At the same time, we're seeing some good things come from that same catalyst right now. We're seeing a push. Now, that push is started with the government, but a push for the EV programs, the electric vehicle programs. Again, we're talking more automotive, but EVs are on the news like crazy.
Yeah.
And here in Tennessee, we've been blessed to have all kinds of new companies coming in here, investing in on Tennessee soil to start, doing things, being suppliers for EVs. And we have existing customers here who are making those investments. And a lot of that is subsidies from the government. And honestly, big companies are going to follow the money. And if the government's giving away money, that's what they're going to do. And so you want them to do that if you're an employee because you want your job.
You want your job.
And so if you want that raise, if you're hoping for that raise and they're not following the money, they're not going to be able to give it to you. But that's kind of what's happening. But also we had record spike in fuel costs last month. We also saw a record sales month in electric vehicles. And so it's pushing us into that initiative. So those kind of things can happen. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, the environment being what it is, we know we have a problem. EVs help. Now, whether they're practical for what you do for a living or not, that remains to be seen. But, it is something that's happening. We got to figure out what to do with the batteries once they're done. That's something nobody's talking about,
Right.
And that's going to be the next environmental problem, I'm afraid. But those are the things that human nature. We've always put our cart before the horse, but it's progress. From an industrial manufacturing standpoint, what can all of this high-low crisis, that we're seeing, what can it push forward that's a good thing? Industry 5.0.
Oh, all right.
That will be our next topic here on Industrial Automation. It doesn't have to, so we're going to wrap up with that. So it's a bit of a teaser.
It is.
Industry 5.0. Do your research. We're getting ready to undergo a new industrial revolution.
Oh, I can't wait to listen. Thank you, Brandon.
Guys, thanks for joining us. Hey, Beth.
Yes, Brandon.
Have a fantastic day.
You too.
See you later. Bye, guys. Hey, guys. Thanks for checking out today's episode of Industrial Automation. It doesn't have to. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, make sure you give us a rating that's pretty doggone high, and do that everywhere you listen, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We'd really appreciate it. Also, don't forget about our website. That's www.ellitek.com. That's ELLITEK.com. If you want to reach out to us there, you can fill out our contact form. We'd appreciate it. Also, you can email us at info@ellitek.com. And certainly for those of you that still like to dial the phone, give us a call, 865-409-1555. We'd love to hear from you.